I think most of you all may be having just Office 365 as a tenant. And when you actually come to renew this whole collaborative package, there was a thought that we put across saying that, there's something wider to look at. And it's really, pivoted around the zero trust security model. I mean, there are SKUs that you can add in to your renewal. And we wanted to share with you today during these next 60 minutes what you could do with Microsoft towards bringing in a zero trust security model in your organization. It's not necessary that you need to have Office 365. I'm just saying, since you're all coming up for a renewal, just renewing O365, I think just pause for a moment, and maybe at the end of 60 minutes, we would have given you some food for thought. And our teams are always waiting by to connect with you subsequently to do those workshops, right? So let me begin. And one second, I think I have a problem. Just bear with us. Yeah. So I always liked this comment from John Chambers, and I'm going to read it out. I know it's there to see, but there are two types of companies, right? Those who have been hacked and those who don't yet know they've been hacked. And I can't tell you how true that is because it is really happening out there in our industry. For example, these were some of the statistics that I want to bring forward. For example, the average number of days that an attacker resides in your network, right? It's 146. It's actually gone up to even 230, 240, depending on which statistics you look at. While that's statistically telling us what's happening in the world, I think the question to each one of us or to each one of you is, how certain are you that there isn't an active sleeper in your network? How sure can you be? Because we're talking about advanced, persistent threats. We're talking about malicious malware coming in, whole lot of stuff coming into the, into the network. How certain are you that you're able to catch that? Number one. Number two, the biggest thing, right? And they've understood this, and I'm sure numbers change. I've seen a number as high as 72%, that all intrusions actually begin with weak identities, right? And that's becoming a sort of a pigeonhole through which these attackers come in most of the time, who do identity based attacks. So the question again to you is then, have you implemented something just beyond username, passwords? I mean, forget about the fact that password has to be unique and so many characters. Have you gone forward and sort of implemented a single sign-on kind of environment in your organization so that end users don't have to remember many passwords? And MFA, multi-factor authentication, everybody's talking about that now. And in fact, that statistic shows blocks 99.6% of these attacks, right? Just by implementing MFA. And also bringing some context to access. And we'll talk about that more in the zero trust model, right? Especially when people are coming towards your business critical applications. Is it a very static define if you have a username, password you're in? Or do we add more context around it? Where are you coming from? Which device are you using? Right? Have your credentials been hacked, etc. Depending on your risk score at that time, when you're logging in, exactly at that time is when I want to take some decisions. So have you implemented something like that? You should, because I'm going to come back to the 63% number later, and it's going to be relevant to all of us, right? Of course, they talk about the potential cost of cybercrime, etc. But the point over here is that in your organization, if there is going to be a breach of information, which could be intellectual property, which could be anything, right, which is very, very important for your organization, what's it worth to you, right? One of the pharma companies I spoke to in Bangalore, and I was talking to their CIO, and he said he was talking about the cost of a drug that normally in their pharma world, it takes 7 years to bring a drug out, right? For some moments, I didn't know it was 7 years. There are a lot of field trials, as we all know. And he says it costs $1 billion, B for Bangalore, $1 billion in its development. So he says if somebody is able to steal a lot of the field trial data and thing that we have, and let's say that's somewhere in the third or fourth year, right? Well, if he's got the information at year 4, he's 4 years literally ahead of us. All our hard work is gone. So he said the cost of a breach for me is that. Now it may not be $1 billion for all of you all, but the point is to think about: have we been able to sort of set up a very secure, secure posture in our organization that we don't lose that information, right? And this whole thing of security and breach and all that stuff is really being pushed by this whole motion of digital transformation that organizations are going through, right? Because if you remember 20, 25 years ago, right, at the end of the day, every company is extremely worried about the data, and the data used to be sitting inside your data centers, right, within the four walls of your DC. So when you used to come, or Kiran or Ajit comes into the office, then I know the user has come, and if he doesn't come into the office today, I know he's not there, right? So there's no way that they're going to access it, because they had to come to our offices to access desktops, to access our apps, right? But obviously with mobility, what's happened? The users are beginning to go out, right? I don't see them anymore. So if I don't see them anymore, identity has to become extremely critical for me. I need to know you are who you say you are because I can't see you. And then what kind of devices are you coming on to and what kind of apps are running on those devices? I need to know because at the end of the day, what am I trying to protect? I'm basically trying to protect you, your identity, or device being used as a launch platform to come into our data center and pick up my data. Remember, at the end of the day, like that pharma company, data is the gold for any organization. What that gold is in your organization, you know. You're trying to control that access to that particular asset, right? Now, once these people go, and obviously your employees are all out there, working from anywhere, from home, etc. They are also now probably sharing data very inadvertently with their partners or customers, right? And there could be a chance that very confidential data might go, right? Unknowingly, again, I'm not talking about a malicious actor here. Just unknowingly, he may have forwarded something there, right? So you want to have a grip on that because not only can I not see them, I can't see those devices. I want to be able to control what they actually are able to share. I'm worried about sharing any confidential information. And the fourth circle, since this in this new digital age, because everybody has to connect with everybody, right? They're also probably downloading a lot of cloud-based applications beyond the SaaS-based applications that we authorized. So I may have authorized O365 and Salesforce as my SaaS-based applications, but individuals might be downloading a lot of other SaaS applications for their own productivity. Could be a simple thing as a calculator, right? Or a currency conversion calculator that I want, right? Unknowns to me, that probably could be a very malicious SaaS app. So I would like to know, for example, what is the behavior of my people, on the cloud, on those different cloud and access to different kind of data, right? And not only that, because again, driven by digital, you have partners, you have third-party contractors working for you, you have customers who want to now connect and interact with you. And so there's the challenge actually for all of us in this new digital transformation age is being able to secure it at every point. Because at the end of the day, you don't want security to become an inhibitor because people have realized that security, this question of saying, no, no, you can't, is becoming a big business inhibitor and the business people don't like it. But security has to be literally hidden where I'm able to I'm able to encourage everybody to come in, not only partners, not only contractors, not only customers. It could be anybody. You can come in, but I'm ensuring that I'm able to ensure a safe and secure access to assets because people have realized that the more open you are, right, and the more you tell people do whatever you want, no problem. But I've got this very invisible, security fabric running behind. And that is really what we're going to talk about, right? You should be going or changing your security from that perspective. So in the past, what did we all do, right? Organizations protected themselves by putting a perimeter around the network. So for example, we said that everybody who was inside the network, right? All of us for the last 15 years, putting firewalls on the perimeter, saying that if you're inside, you're trusted and you're blue, and everybody outside that perimeter was untrusted, right? And we sort of used to implement this by using firewalls, IPS, IDS devices on the network, right? So this is just a question of why we are moving towards a zero trust, because how did we protect assets before? We had a lot of assets, right? So we said let's just put a perimeter around this, and so that was what the trusted network perimeter became, your internal and external. And a lot of the initial attacks were very network based, right? And moment you came in, we sort of assume that if you're inside the network, you have a lot more privileges than the person who was outside. But then what happened with this whole digital transformation push and work with the customers and work with partners, a lot of us started moving out, right? And then so there's no more that clear sort of physical network perimeter anymore, right? So it was bring your own device, work from anywhere and things like that. And so even the attackers kind of changed their attack vector, right? So they started shifting not to network level attacks but to identity based attacks now. And as a result, what was happening? Because once I came in and you were still running it the old way, and I got somebody's credentials inside, could be even the admin guy's credentials or the CFO or even a lead guy, project leader of the team. I'm having a ball because I can now, exfiltrate assets beautifully out because I'm inside. And if I'm inside, I'm trusted. And if I'm trusted, I have extra large privileges going on, right? So this whole story of, moving away from a network-centric sort of protection to an identity-based protection is simply because, again, I'm putting it up there, digital transformation. I think the edge that business wants is to be able to collaborate without boundaries. Let me put it that way. Employees, customers, partners, distries, they all want to do that. But when I look at our current situation, right, where we are right now, and a lot of your organizations are also there, we are aware that attackers are not really hitting the networks too much as they're hitting identities, right? Because they realize get the identity and I have super privileges inside. So they're using identities to bypass network controls. Then our network, I mean, in terms one policy of our passwords, right? Not strong enough. We are still using a username password, though a complex type password, but that's also breaking. And we're also realizing that your identities, which are internal, are also being used outside the network, right? So that's our current situation that we are there. And remember, identity is so critical. I said I'll come back to this number, right? If we don't sort out that problem, you're never going to have never going to be able to support the business's digital transformation initiatives where anytime, any place with anybody on any device, I want unfettered access. I want to be able to work well, right? So it's very, very clear, right? A couple of years back, actually, that we can't only depend on network level security, right, to protect us. A lot of people right now in the COVID time have implemented an IPsec VPN for their users to log in, and they know that's not the right way to do it, but they had no choice. But again, we're in conversations with a lot of them to transform it from a network level IPsec VPN access kind of basis to moving towards a kind of a, I think a zero trust cloud, which is basically based on identities, right? So in this new world, the way to protect your assets, at the end of the day, protecting your assets is to ensure that you're pivoting around the identity of the person, because guess what? Identity is really becoming the new firewall, right? Not your perimeter firewall. And the device that the user is using, whatever device he's using, that is becoming your new perimeter. You know what I mean? So we'll talk about those things as we go along, right? So back to my point, it's time again. I just want to keep resetting this, that I know you are all Office 365 users. I know that all of you all are secure in some way. Most customers, I'm telling you, are both basically done a network level perimeter control, and that's how they've been doing it in the past. But going forward, I think we are coming into an era where just network level perimeters are not going to hold it, because your people need to not always come into your network to do things. They need to collaborate elsewhere. And how do you make sure that that collaboration, that access, that authorization is okay and in control and the device is fine? So it's about building this second level or second parameter, which I call as an identity parameter, right? And both will coexist because you can't rip and replace or anything like that. But I'm saying going forward, you need to build an identity parameter around your network. And that's what I mean by that's where the zero trust security model comes in. And the zero trust security model is very, very simple. It basically says we used to have the old saying that I'll trust, but I will verify later, right? In zero trust, it's the other way around. I will never trust until you verify that you are who you are. So, for example, I do not trust the user, right? Till you tell me who you are very solidly. I'm not going to trust your device till you tell me who you are, right? When I say a contextual request, which device, which user, which location, right? Which application are you trying to access? I want to contextualize that because I don't trust you. Because remember, with the identity perimeter model, there is no concept of internal network, external network. That is gone, right? So whether you are an employee or you are an attacker, for me, you're unseen, and I don't trust either of y'all till y'all verify, and I'm able to verify everything down the line. And then I will decide whether I want to give you access or not. We'll see that in some of the demos, right? Based on the Microsoft tools. But the security model is just this: verify who, contextualize the request. You want to make sure that your admin credentials and elevated privilege credentials are safe. And you also want to give to that person, whoever it is, a just in time and a just enough access, right? For example, the administrator doesn't need to have admin access for the entire Linux server, for example. What is the work that he wants to do, right? So I give him just enough of access. And how long do you think that work is going to take? It's going to take 30 minutes. So then there's this workflow on which he has to request for that access, and he gets those admin privileges on that particular task for 30 minutes. That's it. Because the whole point of everybody on this call knows about advanced persistent threats. People laterally move around, they go to a Linux server, they grab an admin credential, and supposing in the old way, certain admin guys had their passwords, and if this attack gets those passwords, guess what? He's breached the entire system. Because from there, he's going to hop to other servers as an admin, etc., and get a lot of information. So in our network, we are saying we don't trust anybody. I don't even trust the administrator. He's got a request for the access and then I come. And so that's the basis of the zero trust security model. And just a little history about this. It's nothing new. In fact, zero trust, this discussion began in 2004 when a couple of CISOs of financial institutions in the UK formed something called the Jericho Forum, where they advocated this, don't trust. You know, everybody cannot be trusted. The user, the device, the network is hostile. That is what they came out with, right? And if you look in terms of as it went along, Google in 2014, if you look at the purple piece down below, Google actually, in fact, in 2010, Forrester came out with this, formalized this word called zero trust. In 2014, Google implemented this, but at a network level, right? Not so much as an identity, but they did it at a network level, and they published their entire zero trust model in a document called Beyond COP. So they were very open with what they did. Microsoft's story with zero trust began way back in 2014. We decided we will take an assumed breach model. I'm going to talk about that later. Conditional access was kind of released in 2016. Now we're doing the password list stuff. Whole lot of interesting things that are there, right? And I liked the Google's, the Google's thing over here. So let me just draw that, because this is in a sense what you're trying to do. So what did Google's Beyond COP said? Connecting from a particular network must not determine which services you can access. Whether you're inside or outside, I don't care. Just because you're inside means you cannot access. Number one, access to service is granted based on understanding of you and your device, right? So it's going to be very contextual as you come in. And of course, all accesses to be authenticated, authorized, and encrypted. So essentially, they are saying, I don't trust anybody, right? So you got to verify before you come in. So if I just compare, again, the zero trust, and this is probably one of the last two slides on zero trust, but the way zero trust was implemented at the network level, well, it was at network connections. And what I'm talking about, and Microsoft is talking about zero trust, is building up an identity perimeter where the control plane is going to be access requests, right? And we are really looking at identity as a pivot point, right? If I look at the how the network side of the house was doing it, it was doing it with microsegmentation, literally gating access almost down to an IP address of a server, right? Whereas on my side, on the identity side, it's not so much about gating it on a microsegmentation basis, it's about the identity, all right? Where inside is defined by authentication, authorization, context, a whole lot of stuff, right? So, and the applicable scope on a network side was pretty limited, right? Simply because protecting of SaaS, PaaS assets is way beyond the network segmentation level that you can do. But when you come to an identity parameter, it's start out star. It's across, because I as a user can come on to my on-premise apps and I need to make sure who I am and I'm trusted, etc. I as a user can go to cloud-based apps. Again, because I'm part of the organization, I need to be able to ensure who I am, what device I am, where am I coming from, etc. So the identity perimeter firewall or the identity security perimeter encompasses all those assets, right? So really the differentiation between the way we are currently doing things, and I'm not saying you have to rip and replace firewalls. No, that they do serve a purpose. But in this digital age of collaborating multiple applications, not only legacy on-prem, but cloud, and making sure that everybody is working well, and we're trying to limit, right, these attackers coming in. I think implementing a zero trust is the way to go, right? So I want to then introduce you to the Microsoft Zero Trust Security Model Principles. And the reason I'm talking about the Microsoft side of the house is because there are SKUs that you can build into your renewal, right? Which can extend your protection beyond just collaboration on O365 that you have. But you can either, and I will talk about those elements, those little SKUs. You can I actually take, some of them, which you want to start with immediately, or Microsoft has also given a lot of packages where you can take the whole thing along with your collaboration, along with endpoint management and all of that stuff as one bundle. So when you're listening to this, just remember that it's all about when we come up for renewal, can we sort of expand the SKU to include this? So back to what Microsoft basically says, very simple, verify explicitly. Everybody's going on the fact that we do not trust you. You got to verify. And I'm going to use signals from everywhere. Identity, location, device health, all that's going to become a very important part of my decision criteria. Second, I'm going to assume least privileges. Think of that admin user I spoke about, right? He doesn't get it till he wants it and he requests for it, and I want to know what he's doing and the time that I'm going to talk about it, right? And the third one is I'm going to assume that I'm always going to be breached. Now, people don't understand that, but the point is you want to actually ensure that you're encrypting traffic, you're using a lot of analytics, you're looking for lateral behavior all the time. And the analogy I'll give you is this. If you're staying in an independent house and every time you leave the house, right, your security posture is such that I want to close all the window, the back door, the front door. I want to lock the gate, make sure everything is, lights are off or lights are on, because I'm just very scared that somebody is going to come in, right? The same person who lives in a gated community, I don't know whether you've seen your friends in gated communities or even in apartment complexes. I mean, they leave the back door open, they leave the bikes outside, front doors can be open. So, that is where you're not assuming to be, because in gated communities, you're not assuming to be robbed, right? So Microsoft's principle on zero security is saying, hey, you are like that independent house. Every time you go away, you want to make sure that everything is locked, and I'm assuming that I'm going to be robbed. So therefore, I want to have cameras, I want to have CCTVs, I want to have the whole 9 yards. I need to keep analyzing things, and to make it difficult, I want to encrypt, as much as myself on the data. So these are the three basic principles from a Microsoft angle, right? So if I talk about Microsoft's zero trust access control, very simple. All we are saying is that I will take signals that come either from devices, right, or your user, and I'll talk about this later in coming slides. Based on how you're coming in, what kind of authentication you're using, which device, where are you, etc., right? I have to make a decision, because you want to access my gold, my gold, which is my data, right? I will then take an access whether to allow, whether to revoke, whether to force an MFA or make you reset passwords based on a certain set of conditions. And this is the signals I'm going to take. And then I will allow you the access, and then I've got to ensure that I enforce that access. So it's very simple. If you look at it, it's like there's some certain set of inputs coming from here. There is some processing that I need to do, and I need to take an output and ensure that I'm able to enforce that, right? So zero trust, I'm saying the new security paradigm is just this. Identity is the new firewall. Remember that. It's not your perimeter anymore, because attackers are trying to breach your firewall, right? Physical firewall. Attackers are now trying to breach my identity. So I become the new firewall. My devices you can consider as your perimeter. As your physical perimeter is not your 4 servers, right? It's probably all of us who have a device, and that device is the perimeter. And I have to assume a breach. When I say assume a breach, well, you've got to have visibility into who you're lying on the network. You got to watch what's happening on the network. You got to learn and adapt from all of that stuff. So it's like you're locking up your house. You want to make sure you have the tool sets there, because I'm assume the network is hostile, right? So a lot of the companies are in different stages. Remember, the zero trust is a strategy. It's a direction. It's not a set of tools. It's a philosophy that you're trying to go towards, right? So and everybody has a zero trust solution. Let me tell you, all the number one vendors. I mean, all the vendors, not only number one vendors. But where are you in your journey, and which part of it that you want to plug in is something that I encourage you to look at in your renewal times, right? So when you take O365, I'll talk about the tools from Microsoft that you can add in depending on where you are, right? So let's meet the Microsoft tool sets, right? You already have Office 365, so that's a given. So we have, I would say, 7+1 tools, and I'll say why am I saying +1, right? So we have something called Microsoft Enterprise Mobility and Security. I'm sure many of you all have heard about it. I'll just allude to it a little bit. So it's called EMS. Then we have our endpoint device operating system is called Windows 10 Enterprise. I'm going to talk a lot about that a little bit. And of course, we have the Advanced Threat Protection Suite that is there from Microsoft to really head off, this very malicious malware that comes in with advanced persistent threats, right? So it's a combination of 7+1 tools, right? So let's get introduced to the first one, which is EMS. Very broadly, Microsoft Enterprise Mobility and Security, as you see, is a combination of about 5 odd products, right? So you have Azure Active Directory, which is nothing but your identity and access management piece. I'm going to talk a lot about that. I'm trying to keep it within 60 minutes, so I'm going to use the time a little judiciously. I have Microsoft Intune, which basically does the mobile device and mobile application management. So the complete life cycle of provisioning, patching, deprovisioning devices, right to even application, provisioning it at the App Store, downloading it, patching it, upgrading it, retiring it, all of that is managed through Microsoft Intune. Information protection is all about data. Remember, we talked about those ellipses, and we find out that users are accidentally sending confidential data around. Is there a way in which I can actually prevent that and put some policies? That comes out from the third tool of Azure Information Protection. Fourth is in terms of threat detection, lateral movement. We all know how advanced persistent threat works. Or there's a funny behavior of my cloud account. There's a funny behavior of on-premise by this user, right? I want to be able to capture that. And that is actually covered by the Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics and Microsoft Cloud App Security. Basically, they're looking for abnormal behavior and access both in the cloud as well as on-premise. So if you look at those ellipses that I drew the earlier, this is what actually encompasses that whole piece, because remember, we want to be able to protect at every stage, right? The second part of the tool. So EMS had about 5 tools in it. Windows 10 Enterprise. A lot of people don't know that Windows 10 is solidly built up from the ground for security. Unlike the Windows 7 and Windows 8, there were a lot of lacking stuff in Windows 7 and Windows 8. And we have, and I'll talk about the plans later, but essentially things like, I don't know how many of you all know that, the Windows 10 Enterprise version is actually Hyper-V underneath. It's a virtualized based platform that you have where the core, the core kernel and all those particular drivers, think of it as on a separate VM, all your applications deployed in their separate virtual machine spaces, right? We're beginning with saying that this is virtualization based security, number one, right? If I look at Credential Guard, for example, I don't know how many of you all know that on the supported platform that you have, because Intel and Microsoft have worked together, where your credentials, very important user credentials, right, are actually stored in hardware, in silicon, actually in hardware isolated containers. Of course, you need to have the Intel chip, and I think most of the laptops and desktops have that now. But the point here is that if credentials are in software, it's easily pickable. So can we actually burn it in silicon? Pretty good. I'm sure a lot of you all don't know that. I didn't know it. Credential guard, right? Then you have device guard and you have boot guard, etc. So that I'm even at the BIOS level, because malware goes and sits over there. I ensure that your BIOS doesn't change, because sometimes by the time Windows 10 starts, the BIOS is already compromised, right? So whole lot of interesting security features are coming to Windows 10. And as part of the zero trust model, you want to make sure that the endpoint device, especially a lot of us on Windows 10, that OS is super tight, right? So you're going to find all of those products. I'm not going to go through all of this. And the third set of tools that we have is the Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection family. A lot of you all are aware of it. ATP, essentially, it's if I look at Office 365 ATP, it's ensuring that you only have safe attachment and safe links. So if the mail comes in with a very funny looking attachment, ATP is going to take it out, check it out in its, in its own chamber. They call it as a detonation chamber. See whether that attachment is malicious or is it really just that picture that somebody sent you. Similarly, in a link, somebody says click and watch this beautiful goal by Ronaldo or whatever. I will actually take that link and see whether it's really going to that site and really playing that video, right? So all of you all are very familiar with Office 365 ATPs, right? The same thing is extended on to Windows 10. So Windows Defender ATP is the new endpoint detection and response malware protection for your endpoint. Earlier on, we used to just have antivirus and things like that. But today people are saying signature based and that database stuff, no fun. I want to be able to lock down the endpoint very, very hard. And that's what Windows Defender ATP does. Make sure that only trusted programs run. If they find a process running in the kernel, you get alerted, right? If the behavior of the end user is very different from what pattern is already seen, I want to be alerted. So, gone are the days of this antivirus stuff. So things like EDRs are the new endpoint protections, endpoint detection and response system. And the same thing on Azure ATP is done in your cloud accounts, right? By default, always your OneDrive, SharePoint is all available, but there are also GUIs for us to hook into other cloud platforms where you want to have the same watch and visibility on the other platforms, right? So we have that ATP piece. And this is the plus one that I want to talk about, right? This is nothing but Microsoft's own cyber defense unit. We refer to it as the intelligent security graph, right? What is it? This is something that you desperately need to back you up. This is the telemetry of information that Microsoft cyber defense team has. And look at it, I've just highlighted a few. They are analyzing 400 billion emails, right? They are analyzing 6.5 trillion threat analyzed every day, right? Look at the number of monthly authentications, 450 monthly. What am I talking about all these figures? The point is they have a huge, they run Xbox, they run OneDrive, they run the consumer version of Outlook, etc. The kind of telemetry of information they have, right? They are able to be very much up there in the front in terms of detecting any new attacks, any new behaviors, any new malware, right? And when you actually upgrade into EMS and Windows 10 and all of that stuff, you get this Microsoft intelligent security graph backing you big time, right? So that was just a kind of laying the ground for you. So I'm just going to go through not everything, because in the interest of time, I'm not going to go everything, but I really want to talk about Azure Active Directory, because that is the heart of it, right? Because we talked about identity and how important it is for zero trust. So quickly to just call out the components. And again, these are all the SKUs that you can upgrade to individually, or I will talk about how Microsoft has packaged them. Number one, we want to verify and secure all the identities, right? So that's where your Azure Active Directory comes in. I want to gain visibility into devices, making sure they're not jailbroken, etc. Right? So that's where Intune comes in. I want to make sure that my people are not downloading those funny calculators, right? And they're doing funny things on the cloud applications outside the Microsoft ones. That's where a cloud access security broker and ATA comes in, advanced threat analytics. This is the on-premise watch. This is the cloud watch, right? If I talk about infrastructure, I certainly want to employ real-time threat detection, and that comes with our intelligent security graph. If I look at data, I want to be able to classify, label, protect data, and that's where your Azure information protection comes in. And from a network level, we are probably a little weak on the network level, I have to admit. But at the same time, we allow you to do things like, at your endpoint, at least your bit defender and things like that, right? So these are the basic 6 elements from a Microsoft angle. So like I said, I'm going to talk about Azure Active Directory because these are the number of organizations that have gone for it. And I'm going to expose you to what all you could do with just Azure Active Directory. Forget the other 7 tools, just with Azure Active Directory. Remember, identity is so critical. So let's talk about the identity and access management, like powered by Azure Active Directory. So the first thing is secure authentication. Now we really want the one and only request I would do is that if you all have not implemented an MFA, multi-factor authentication, just start with that. Because the moment you do that, look at the data point on the right hand side, literally 99.9% of those identity attacks are stopped, right? And at Microsoft, we include a lot of password technologies like, Microsoft Authenticator is a small little app that you can load on your mobile. It's like that OTP. We'll see a demo of that. Or Windows Hello, right? I just want to look at your face and, again, passwordless, get in. And Google and Microsoft and a lot of other companies are trying to develop newer techniques called fast identity online. They call them FIDO keys, right? It could be software or hardware, which basically means no passwords. That's what I'm trying to say. Or biometric stuff, right? So the first step in the game is from your Office 365, when you moved in, you want to bring in identity as a way to pivot around access. Make sure that your passwords that you're currently using are at least being surrounded by multi-factor authentication, right? And there's been a huge adoption of this because if you look at the password list with Windows 10 Hello, great adoption. Biometrics is really picking up big time. And now you get these scanners, right, on the laptops itself. So makes things a lot easier. Second piece of the puzzle with Azure AD, conditional access, right? What do I mean by conditional access? Well, based on user location, device, and your risk level, I will decide what kind of access you get to the application. Simple, right? And remember, I want to implement this in a very contextual way. There's not like standard. If you are the admin, then you can go. No, 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 no. Who are you? Where are you? What device? What are you trying to do, etc. What time of day are you coming, etc. All of that's going to become a factor for me. So I wanted to think of with Azure AD, what you can do is bring in, you can also bring in this conditional access. So first thing is I probably want to see is that what is the user's role? Who is he? Where is he, right? What is the device on which he's coming from? Healthy, not healthy? Which applications does he want to go to, right? Where is he coming from? Is it something like if you're coming in from Ukraine or Russia or wherever it is, I won't want to allow that access, right? Maybe you have a time of day that you expect only those logins to happen. And the other one is what is the sign-in risk of the user's identity? In a sense that it could be that user signing in, I just saw a sign in from him 5 minutes back from Bangalore, and then I see an impossible travel. I see another sign in from Singapore, same username, Kiran, but from 2 different places. No, something is wrong, right? Or it could be that I have the user's credentials. I, as Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph, I'm aware that your CFO's credentials are available in the dark web, right? So moment he is logging in, I want to then stop him and force him to reset passwords, right? So these are the conditions basically, right? So depending on what kind of who you are, what device you're on, where are you located, and which applications you want to go to, I want to implement a set of conditions. So I want to either allow, deny, or I require a multi-factor authentication. Or like I said, force a password reset if I think the user is already compromised, or I will control the session. I will allow him to read and check things, but if he tries to download something, I'm going to stop it, right? So that's the beautiful things that you can do. Again, based on Azure AD, bring in zero trust, right? And you're good to go. So you have MFA and a whole lot of conditional access happening. And like I said, with the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph, these are the services that we can back you up with. I mean, you can never do this. You will never be able to send somebody has atypical travel, or somebody's coming in with a a malware linked IP address. You may not know what are the malwares out there. I know, and I realize that from that particular IP address, which is already malware classified according to me, somebody's coming in, right? So Azure AD's identity protection is a service that backs you up, and it works every time any of your users are logging in. I'm able to do these quick checks and then say sign in risk level is low, medium, high. And that becomes, like I said, a decision point to me what I want to do, right? Single sign-on. I can't tell you this is the first use case, and I'm going to talk about some of the 8 use cases that we see customers deploying. We have done it ourselves. Single sign-on, simple. Whether it's on-premise, legacy, SaaS applications, stop giving them multiple passwords. Let them sign on singly so that they have an environment where they come in and they can access any of the applications they want, SaaS, on-premise, whatever it is, beautifully from one. Just say it's like mynewwaycomputing.com. I press enter, username, password, boom, I'm good to go. Right? Privileged identity management. Again, you don't have to buy a third-party product for this. It's part of Azure AD. We remember we talked about the just-in-time and just-enough access. Well, that is part of Azure AD, privileged identity management. Not only your cloud-based apps, even a single sign-on to your legacy-based application. So if you're somebody who's signing in and you're trying to get onto your on-premise applications, I will proxy you through my Azure AD app proxy so that you still continue to have that single sign-on experience, right? If you're using application delivery controllers like Citrix or F5 or Akamai or Zscaler, we work beautifully with them as well, right? To give the telemetry information back to them or take telemetry information from them. So the point is legacy applications, not a problem. And the point is with Azure AD, and once it's connected to your on-premise AD, if that's the way you want to go, I can give you a single sign-on to SaaS, classic, legacy, or even new applications with new tools and things you're doing. It is absolutely a single sign-on, and especially with external business partners, I can tell you don't come with only my password. You come with whatever credentials you want, right? So for example, if you are a customer and you've got a Google password and you want to access, because I want you to connect with me, right? Collaborate with me, I'll give you access to these, right? For example, or if you're an employee and you're using the Microsoft Authenticator app on your mobile, well, I can give you access to all of these applications and so on and so forth. If you're a partner and you're using your email password, could be Google or Yahoo, you want to come and we can certainly do that, right? We can federate that for you. So any apps bringing your own identity, not a problem with Azure AD, right? And it gets better. With Azure AD, for example, I can do something like identity lifecycle management. So, all of us have people who are joining. I mean, depending on which industry you are, there are a lot of new employees coming in every week, right? So this whole question of getting them provisioned quickly, right? When people join, so it's called the joiner, mover, leaver process. Is there a way in which that entire process can be automated? That means I take the input from your HR database because a new person is joined. Moment you put them in there, right? And one of the customers said, we don't action this workflow till the fellow shows up on Monday morning because a lot of them take the offer and they don't come. So let's say Monday morning you come in, his entire identity can be set up, right? In not just the identity, his email address, Salesforce password, whatever, everything can be provisioned for him in a complete cycle, right? Part of Azure AD. If the guy moves from Delhi to Bangalore or moves between India to another location, obviously what he has access to could change. So even the mover process is completely automated. And of course, if somebody leaves, resigns, very easy to terminate all his access and all this. Simple processor, joiner, mover, leaver process. And the way that we actually did it with one of the customers, the way we showed them, and they were hiring something like 800 a day, right? So you can imagine this is like a call center scenario going on. He was saying that when my people come in on Monday, IT is only able to give them their laptops by Tuesday afternoon, 1.5 days, right? He says after the orientation for half a day, then the guys are doing nothing. With this JML process, and this is just one feature of Azure AD, by the way, right? They have been able to accelerate that whole enablement in 30 minutes. What took 1.5 days is now taking 30 minutes. So we were able to qualify in terms of productivity loss and therefore productivity gain by those people get going, etc. I mean, everything has to be business justified today, right? So you want to do all those things, but a simple thing like JML in your environment would be very, very useful. Next, once I give all these accesses, right, to people in this great zero security trust model, I want to make sure that I gave some access to some project department. 6 months have gone by, and does the team still require access to these particular assets? Is the third-party contractor still with us, not with us? So I can send a message out to the team saying that please review accesses, let me know. These are all workflows that are kicked off immediately. And moment the team says, no, please keep the ID on for another 3 months, he has to extend it. It's all completely automated. Or I can say the project is over. Out of the 10 guys, 8 guys' credentials can be, shut down. 3 contractors done, do it automatically. So these are what we call as access reviews, right? Because Azure AD ensures if identity is the pivot on which we're doing things, the governance has to be solid, right? So that's what the Azure AD identity governance does. Whole lot of interesting things. I don't want to spend too much time, but essentially a user can go and self-provision guest accounts when people come in. Like if I'm a project manager, I have to enable some 5 guests. I can quickly ask for those accounts to be created. I can also automate the entire entitlement process, right? I can set policies based on groups or individuals. I can do those access reviews we just spoke about, making sure that there's identity is completely okay. Access is always watched, and things like privileged identity, they're getting exactly what they want, right? All of that has actually been taken care of by Azure AD. So that is just one little element there. On Intune, I just want to touch upon one part that Windows Intune basically is able to manage devices, manage applications, and is able to also give us a lot of telemetry based on whether the device is compromised, based on a lot of does he have an antivirus, not the required a browser version. All that good stuff is what Intune does, and that's where Windows 10 becomes so good, because look at Windows Defender System Guard or the Windows Defender ATP, all of those pieces, right? If you look at here at boot time, we do all these checks. At runtime, we're constantly doing these checks, right? I extend myself to be managed by Intune, right? So super secure, managed by Intune, right? And that could be a signal that Intune sends out to Azure AD to then decide what kind of access is given, right? So Windows 10 plays in with Intune, plays in with Azure AD, and these guys really work together, right? And the last part is the identity protection. Again, I'm in the whole Azure AD piece, right? We've seen this typical attack, right? So you have advanced persistent threat attack where somebody is basically doing a little research on you, right? Then they come and target your first account. And within 24 to 48 hours, they've already compromised the domain. And then they lie like a sleeper very quietly for any number of days. And they exfiltrate the data out till they get discovered, right? So what do we typically do? So we basically have multiple solutions. So if anybody sees this threat chain, this is really that advanced persistent threat chain. That fellow sends you a mail, right? A phishing mail or a link. The user then double clicks on it, and so for that malware gets installed, sets up a command center as you see here, attempts to obviously user account is already compromised, right? So basically what he wants to do is he attempts to do lateral movement, and maybe he lands on a server like a Linux server or a very important with their very easy pickable credentials, and he gets privileged account access over here. So now the account, the privileged account, the administrator account is basically hacked, and he starts actually sending his information out to his command control post wherever it is. And God forbid if the entire domain is hacked, then you're down, right? So typically we've seen customers adopting point solutions for all of this. The interesting thing about it is that with Microsoft's Azure EMS and all that I just spoke about, all of that is available from one vendor itself, right? So our Office 365 ATP is what you already use for, malicious attachments and links on your system. Your Defender endpoint detection response is going to find out there's some funny behavior going on, even if he slips past that. Identity protection with that intelligent security graph is going to realize that there's a brute force attack happening on this ID, right? As you start moving around, right, whether it's on premise or on the cloud. If it's on the cloud, you're going to have app security watching there. If it's on premise, you're going to have the Azure ATP looking at all of this. So my point is that all of these products talk to each other, right? Absolutely simple, fewer vendors to deal with. And if you look at it, we're trying to simplify the landscape. We're trying to converge all of this, right? So the categories that you see on the left-hand side, these are the products that people typically take. But when you realize and you're trying to converge things, it actually costs a less and reduces management complexity big time, right? So with Microsoft, and again, coming to when you come for your renewals up now, right? And you want to bring in the zero trust security, and you've heard a little bit of what I spoke, right? You can begin by saying that, hey, with Office 365, I want to probably, extend it to Windows 10. I don't want the professional edition. I want the enterprise plan, whether it's E3 or E5, you have an option to do that. Number two, I like the story of EMS, which is nothing but Identity Azure AD. You're talking about Intune, which is managed mobile productivity. You're talking about all that Azure information, DLP, data leakage, and all that cloud app security. Can I get all of that together, or can I pick them one by one? So the answer is you can pick them one by one, or Microsoft has actually pushed that together like a hamburger and given it to you under the guise of enterprise mobility and security, right? And then to further make it more simple, what they've done is with your existing O365, if you like to have the Windows 10 and you like the EMS piece, whether it's the E3 plan or the E5 plan, Microsoft has bunched it and make it even more economical for you to consume this. And I'll come to the pricing, etc. on that, right? So you can start your renewal entry point by saying, I want to add a Windows 10 into this, I want to add Windows 10 into my renewal cycle beyond just my O365, or I want to take Windows 10 and EMS, in which case we'll say then let's go for an equivalent bundle plan, right, of Microsoft 365, because you already have Office 365 with you, right? So the zero trust model, just to remind you, pivoted on identities, pivoted on devices, right? I take all of that telemetry information in, also from what I'm getting from my threat security. I'd have a policy of whether to allow access to data, apps, infra, network, and I have to make sure that I just don't trust anybody till they verify everything for me. So I thought I'll give you a quick run through demos, because enough of talking. Let me talk a couple of very quick demos, right? Just to give you an idea of what is possible, right? When you come up for these renewals. So the first thing is MFA, right? So I'm going to challenge user logging in with an MFA with his Apple Watch and terms of use. So the thing about it is, if you can't see, it's very small, but I'm not logging into Microsoft. I'm logging, for example, to my G Suite or another SaaS application, could be Salesforce, whatever it is, right? Now, what happens quickly is Microsoft Azure AD jumps in and says, hey, this is my organization's welcome page. I'm part of Contoso. So sign in, right? I enter the password. And then I get a message saying that we've sent a notification to your mobile device, just like we have the bank OTPs, etc. But you're now implementing one in your own organization. So that's the Microsoft Authenticator app on the left, or it can be also done on your iPhone, iWatches and things, or SMS, even if it's an old style thing. So I just have to do a single tap, say approve or deny. And then I have this nice terms of use page that I give to the user so that he knows under which terms he's using it. And now I access my Gmail, right? I'm not a Microsoft Mail user. Just that identity was very well controlled, and I was challenged with a second factor authentication. Small demo. Next one. I need a device to be managed and compliant to access corporate resources. So let's assume I'm still going, for example, to my G Suite. In comes Azure AD and says sign in, give me your password, right? I've sent you a notification on my multi-factor authentication, but your sign-in was successful, but your admin requires your device to be managed because you're trying to access an application, for example, where I certainly want to manage the endpoint device, right? So he has to go back and register his device, and then he can get access to that application. A third little demo, right? Limiting auditing sessions from a non-managed device. So for example, again, I go to G Suite. We know this scenario, sign in, I get a username and password.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. I think the last 10-15 seconds.
Okay, so let me come to this second use case. Is that good, Kiran? The second use case?
I think
Kiran?
previous slide, sir.
You want me to do the use case again?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is
right. So use case again.
Yeah. So let's just do the use case again. So this is all about, I need the device to be managed because you as a user are trying to access an application from an unmanaged device. That's what we're trying to show you. So I'm logging in. I sign in. Kiran, tell me if it's coming up in time.
It's coming, sir. It's coming fine.
Yeah. Then I enter the password, right? And then I send a notification to your mobile device. And then I get a message saying your credentials were fine, but if you want to access this app, I need to manage the device. So please go or sign in with a different account. So that's the protection that you've given. Next demo, you see that, Kiran, on the screen?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, so I want to prevent downloads from an app or some sort of a small DLP policy. So again, I log into my cloud-based applications. I get my sign in. I get my password to be entered, right? And I get my MFA to be challenged, and then I'm allowed access, right? And I'm allowed access, and with the message saying that access to G Suite is monitored. You're allowed to do it. I'm going to monitor you. Now, this particular user, are you able to see the screen, Kiran, or Google Drive and all that?
Yes, sir, we can. I can see.
Yeah. So this particular user, for example, I have European expansion.pptx, right? He's attempting to do a download. Now, remember, this is an app that I'm monitoring. But moment he attempts to do that, I'm going to block it and give him a message saying that organization's policy does not allow you to download stuff onto your device, for example. And that's come courtesy of the Cloud App Security module that we have, right? And I obviously, the administrator will also get a notification saying that there was a download attempt by Megan Bowen, this time, this date, etc. All that good stuff and telemetry information is available, right? Now, supposing I want to use a managed app to access data, let's have a look at that, right? So I'm a contractor, right? I want to use, on my iPhone, I want to use Outlook. Outlook is an application, right? So then I add my account, right? So megan@sosmin.org, I'm a contractor, I'm coming and I want to use Outlook, right? I enter the password and they send a notification as always. But now, since this is a managed application by the end user, by the organization, I'm going to ask him to restart the app, because if you're going to use mail to access from my staff, I need you to put in a 4-digit PIN, for example, right? Otherwise, if you're not coming to me, you continue using your Microsoft Outlook whichever way you want. But moment you're trying to access stuff from me, then it's becoming a managed app. And therefore, you have to basically put in this 4-digit PIN, for example, to access. So let's assume he does that. He or she does that. Megan does that. And she is attempting now to send this Contoso patent real Word document, for example, something that's very confidential. Are you able to see this, Kiran?
Yes, I can see that, sir.
Okay, right. And so what happens is that I try and copy paste it a little bit, and you see there's an option at the bottom. You can either email, save. There's no share button. And even in the save, it's only saving to a cloud, can't save to the local device. So if Megan tries to save it to the local device, they're going to say that's not possible. So then she decides to cut paste it, try and open a notepad on her own Apple phone, and then attempt to paste. And then it's going to be stopping there as well. Because remember, the Outlook app now is a managed app where I'm concerned, right? So when you're logging in with my credentials, I'm going to make sure that you want to log in using Outlook app with your credentials, go ahead. But where, so it's kind of that dual persona that I'm able to keep my corporate data separate and your personal data separate, right? And I'll have my policies accordingly. And if the device is jailbroken, a lot of these, Redmi and Xiaomi earlier on used to have jailbroken devices, right? Or devices that were already sort of hacked. So you had a jailbroken device. You try to log in again with that Outlook app. I'm going to stop you immediately in your tracks, saying that you're violating some of the policies. And if you had a ransomware going on, I'll quickly find out and I'll tell you, boss, even though you logged in, you can't get from there to here because your device posture is all wrong, right? And I'll give you all of these dashboards for you to see so that you're able to see that one particular user is kind of compromised. And I can realize that Megan is the person who's tried to log in with a rooted device in our example just now. And I can deny access to any app. So if somebody is using, for example, a Tor browser basically hides your IP address to try and come into my network. When I see the Tor, it's basically gone from Germany to UK to Russia and then to Microsoft to my site that I want to go. I enter my username and password. But again, Azure AD has stopped it and said that your sign-in was successful, but it doesn't meet the criteria because I know you're using a Tor browser and coming in, right? So Cloud App Security then gives us a lot of story on Megan, right? Megan was trying to DLP a file, trying to act from a different country. She was trying to use a Tor IP addresses. All those interesting things come. So what I can very peacefully do, I can automate this later if I want, but I can go to Megan and I can go to G Suite, for example, and I can basically say suspend the user, right? It can be automated as well. So that's just a quick story on the whole power of these tools of, your EMS, your Azure AD, your Intune, your AIP, Azure Information Protection, your Cloud CASB, all of that watching your behavior on the network, right? Somebody asked me, where do you start? Well, start with users, know what apps you're supposed to, access, under what conditions do you want them to access, and what controls needed. That's a great place to start. Like I told you, we'll talk about some of the typical use cases that organizations start with. Some of them say, let's do single sign-on. Once they do that, then they say we want to control all their endpoints. And then I want to make sure that there's conditional access set up so that I want to have secure employee access from wherever they are. That's normally the first three we see. You can add on then fourth is I need to enhance email security beyond just the ATP. They want more than that. They want to protect against APT attacks. So they begin to say that can we do Windows Defender ATP, Office 365 ATP, and Azure ATP? Can we bring all of that in? Because we are getting knocked on quite a bit, right? Some people go for governance on information sharing. That is all that Azure Information Protection DLP story. Like we had, a financial organization that wanted to basically label all their documents as confidential, public, so that moment somebody is trying to type in anything also, I find that word, I lock it down. I don't allow them to be pushed or mailed or whatever it is. Need to automate JML process come up quite a bit. And set up a real-time collaboration platform is nothing but Teams that they wanted to actually set up, right? So we see all of that. So I really want you to lock down your renewal SKUs, right? With all of these kind of SKUs that I'm going to talk about. Choose it wherever you want to start. So if you have an endpoint that you want to protect really hard, that's Windows 10. If you want to get into the whole EMS zero security game, please look at the EMS part. And of course, if you want to bundle it all with your, because you can move it from O365 to M365, it's much cheaper for you. So Windows 10, very briefly, we already saw this. The cost per user per month. Again, these are, I would say list prices. You can get good deals. Its E3 is $12 or $18 per user per month. And the nice thing about Windows 10 is that you also get access to Windows virtual desktops. I don't know how many of you all know that, but you are already paid for when you buy Windows 10 and some of the other SKUs. You can actually spin up Windows virtual desktops in the cloud. What you pay for is the burn of those VMs, but what you don't pay for and is already included in your license is a virtual desktop orchestrator. These are the other SKUs that if you have, you are eligible to spin up Windows Virtual Desktop. So great, it's a great little feature there, right? If I go to Identity Access Management, remember I told you each of these can be bought separately. Azure Active Directory Plan 1 or Plan 2. Intune is for the devices. AIP Plan 1 and 2 is all about data protection. And the AT and the CASB. And the nice thing about it is that if you buy them individually, it's going to be fairly expensive. So as usual, Microsoft does a good job of actually bundling all of this. There's an E3 plan and an E5 plan, which the team can talk to you separately, but as low as $875 per month. And I'll tell you the discounting on this E5 plan. It's if you take it individually, right, all the advanced plans, it comes to $32. But if you buy them as EMS E5, you get it at $15 per user per month. So remember, identity, device, DLP, behavior, right? That's what you get with EMS. How much is it? It's there up for you to see. Third part, you want to bundle it together. Wow, just get what? O365, your EMS and all of that stuff. For those who are less than 300 users on the call, Microsoft has the Microsoft business plans, as we see, less than 300. So you can start as low as 125 rupees per user per month. What will it give you? It'll give you Office online. That means you can't download it to a desktop or 5 devices, but you can access it online. And you get a mailbox, right? A good old 50 GB mailbox, OneDrive, 1 TB, SharePoint, and Teams. Teams is right across the plan for those who are less than 300 users. Obviously, as you go up the plan, you get the full rich Office in addition to whatever you're getting here. But this is the golden SKU for those people who have got 150, 200 users, etc. This is beautiful because we bring in Intune and we bring in Azure Information Protection as well, right? So for less than 300 users, when you're coming up for a refresh and you're just doing O365, please move it to M365 Business Edition. I think it's a beautiful SKU and we can work out great deals for you. For those who are on the enterprise side of the house, I want to draw your attention to the Microsoft 365 E3 plan and the E5 plan. Those are for you. So whether you're on Office 365, E1, E3, E5, moment you jump over here, you are getting your Windows, you're getting your EMS, you're getting your Office 365. You can wrap it up. Difference between the E3 and the E5 plan is here for you to see. All the ATP protection, right, is not there in the E3, but is there in the E5, as well as your Windows Defender, ATP, and the full-blown suite of EMS here. So if you ask me, good deal is the M365 E5 plan. Again, you don't have to go across the organization for this. You can take it for your top management, M365 E5. Then for the middle management, take the E3 plan. You can mix and match. That's why our teams are standing by in a sense to connect with you to make sure that your renewal becomes very, very cost effective. In my mind, if you want to go to the zero trust game, move to the M365 E5 SKU. That is really got the top end of Azure AD, top end of EMS, top end of Windows 10, top end of the protection, right? So when you're doing your renewals, it's not just about you've already enjoyed O365. This is all about wrapping a whole lot of security around it, right? That's O365. You have there your E3, E5 plan. You have EMS and Windows 10. Well, add EMS to it or add Windows 10 to it or just upgrade the whole thing to M365 for renewals. Believe me, this is what is going to be going forward, this whole zero trust security model. And somebody said, where do I start, right? So what we find out is that a lot of people are here, right? They have only on-premises identity. They have limited visibility into device compliance, cloud. We don't have too much of information about that, right? So we do have some, username, passwords, and we have that stuff, right? We are saying move into an advanced stage where there's hybrid identity that is on cloud and on-premise. Devices are registered and compliant. Networks are being segmented, right, into their micro segments, and there's analytics beginning to start in terms of accessing user behavior, etc. At least you're beginning to see this, right? So with the EMS E3 plans and the Windows 10 E3 plans will bring you here. And when you go to the M365 full-blown plan, right, in terms of the Office and the EMS and the Win 10, then you're really kicking, good behavior because you'll have cloud identity with real-time analytics, right? And you'll be able to gate the access to application workloads depending on who, what, where, when, how. Data access decisions are governed by a whole lot of policy engines. Trust has been completely removed and you're verifying everything and you're having automatic threat detection and response happening. So that's the kind of journey that you need to go on. So remember, for your renewals, bring in the zero trust game. If you need the security teams to be in the discussion with us, we can, because this is what you're trying to get done. And we are basically saying add these two to your O365 renewals. And to help you there, we are conducting a free security threat workshop at no cost on premise for you, where we will be doing the following. There will be a quick pre-engagement to understand your setup. We will be downloading a threat check license from Microsoft, which gives us the access to your tenant. Your administrators see the results. We will share with you things in terms of threats against your emails, threats against your identity, threats against your data, so that you'll be really convinced that we need to move into this particular zero trust security solution from Microsoft. With that, I'm at the end. I know I'm probably a few minutes over. That's why we said 60 minutes. That's a little bit about us. For a lot of y'all who don't know, a lot of y'all are our customers, but we are an edge core and cloud organization, and we've been around for the last 21 years. And this is our portfolio of solutions. So it's not just the cloud piece. Today we are discussing with you about the, the whole collaboration path, but we also have a lot of solutions in the data center, on security, and also on robotic process automation, right? So this is really a good spread of who we are. That brings me to the end, and I'm sure that Kiran is going to send out a feedback form. It's not just a regular feedback form, but there are two important things that we want you to tick in there. One is to let us know whether you want to opt in for that security threat workshop. It's a great place to start because you'll decide, no, we're not getting knocked on too much, so I'll just renew my O365. Or yes, we are getting knocked on quite a bit. Maybe I want to look at that zero trust approach. And with that, I only want to start with one element, maybe Azure AD. Or forget Azure AD, we've got a decent single sign-on. Let's do Windows Intune or Microsoft Intune. Let me get a grip of devices. Wherever it is your journey, you can start. So that is where that security threat workshop will show you. Second is, if you're clear what you want, please connect with us because we can do that one-on-one workshop for renewals with you. What to add on, what's the best way to get the maximum buck for it, right? So I hope the 60 minutes was useful, insightful. This is what we're doing for all our customers, especially the ones who are coming up for renewals, because a lot of customers are just renewing, right? And carrying on the same way they were sort of securing their assets. So I hope this was useful, and I'm now going to hand it off back to Kiran. Kiran, I think we are over by 2-3 minutes. Sorry about that.
Right. I think, yeah. So I think, but there's a lot of important information covered, nicely covered in slideshow. I think as we are running out of time, I would like to quickly spend another couple of minutes and see if customers have any queries which they want to ask or which is running in their mind.
Sure.
So customers, now we are opening up for a Q&A session. Before we close, if you have any queries, kindly unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question to Ajit sir. You can still use your Q&A panel as well to chat. If you cannot speak due to certain reasons, you can still use the chat panel and type your questions. I'd be more than happy to read out that and answer your queries.
One of the questions that from the earlier session, customers said that the zero trust is nice, but can I just start with Azure AD? And the answer to that is yes. Zero trust is a strategy. Zero trust is a mindset, right? So it's a journey. So you can start from whichever area you think needs to be addressed first. But the important thing to realize is network perimeter defenses are not going to help your digital transformation journey going forward, because it's going to become a barrier for this whole anywhere, any person, partner, customer, this wild collaboration that's required. They can't keep coming onto your network every time they want to go somewhere else. You need to handle it very, very differently. That's why we're saying identity is the dual parameter, the second perimeter you need to build, right? So that's something came from the earlier sessions. Please feel free to get back in touch. We're going to have the team call you immediately after this. So, in case you want to talk to them one-on-one, I think that'll be good. And Kiran, I think we can close out. So
yeah. Thank you so much, Aditya, for a very insightful session, and also thank you all the participants for joining us this afternoon and making this webinar a successful one. As a part of next steps, as Aditya has already told you, I'm going to send you a thank you note. There'll be a link to to give a feedback on today's webinar topic. Please choose your options accordingly so that we can respond to you suitably post this webinar. Thank you once again. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.